Hello, junkies. Do not fast forward. Don't do it. We will get to the Nocturnal Throwback final episode shortly, but first, big news. Big news. As this podcast ends, I've got two pieces of giant, juicy, swollen news for you. Here we go. The first piece of news is the sequel to Earthcore is up for pre-order as an audiobook over at Audible. That's right. Mount Fitzroy is up for pre-order at, here's the address you go to, bit.ly/Fitzroy, one word, FITZROY-Audible. That's bit.ly, bit.ly/Fitzroy-Audible. If you don't like that address, just go to scottsigler.com/Fitzroy, one word, FITZROY, and you'll see a link on the left-hand side where you can click over to Audible and pre-order it. The book will be out December 3rd, 2020. After 15 freaking years of waiting, it is finally ready to penetrate your ear canal. Here's big news number one, part B. This book will only be available in audiobook form until December 3rd, 2021. After the episode, I will explain why, but no print, no ebook for a year until a year after the audiobook comes out. The audiobook comes out December 3rd, 2020, which is just a few weeks away. But for now, bust out those Audible credits, bit.ly/Fitzroy, one word, FITZROY-Audible, or go to scottsigler.com/Fitzroy, one word. Now, if you don't have Audible, here's part C of number one. If you don't have Audible, we have a way for you to get the book for free. If you don't have an Audible account, you can go to scottsigler.com/Audible. There are instructions on that page for you to get a Mount Fitzroy audiobook for free. No strings attached. You can do it if you want to. All the information is over on that page. Again, that is scottsigler.com/Audible. Great. Other big piece of news. We know what our next podcast novel will be. It will be, are you ready for this? It'll be GFL Book VI, The GANGSTER. We will begin podcasting that novel on November 22nd or November 29th, depending on how long our Nocturnal Throwback Q&A episode is. Speaking of the Q&A, you still have time to get questions in for the Nocturnal Throwback Q&A. We will be streaming that show live at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern on Thursday, November 12th, 2020 at three different places. Facebook.com/ScottSigler, YouTube.com/ScottSigler, and Twitch.tv/ScottSigler. Also, it's on Periscope, and it'll be in a couple other places, but those are the primary places to get it. You still have a little bit of time to get your question in. You can email your questions about the Nocturnal Throwback or anything Siglerism related to info@emptyset.com. A real girl herself will read those questions to me live on the live stream, and I will answer live on said live stream. If you want to get a video question in and possibly see yourself on that stream, super cool. Other junkies will get to see your face, get to see your happiness with the stories and everything, and hear your question. What you need to do is take a vertical cell phone video, 20 seconds or less, and send that to info@emptyset.com. Again, that is vertical, has to be 20 seconds or less. Send it to info@emptyset.com. Don't get crazy with editing. Don't do anything fancy. Just take a straight up 20-second vertical video, send it to info@emptyset.com. Hopefully, we will see your face on the air. There you go, ladies and gentlemen. That is the big news. Now, here we go with the final episode of the Nocturnal Throwback Podcast. I will be back after the episode to talk about the rationale behind the audio-only Audible deal, but the next thing you hear will be the original Talkie Talk from 2008, and then the final episode of Nocturnal Throwback. I'm glad you made it this far. I hope you've enjoyed it. Enjoy. Welcome to the free podcast novel, Nocturnal. This is episode 40. If this is the first time you've heard the story, there are 39 episodes that precede this one. If you want to start from the beginning, go to scottsigler.com/nocturnal beginning. Nocturnal is a podcast-only novel you can't buy in stores and you can't peek at the end. Written and performed by Scott Sigler. More information and more free stories available at scottsigler.com. This book contains adult language, mature situations, and lots of violence. Hello, all of my junkies, and welcome to the last episode of Nocturnal. I'm not even lying to you this time. This really is the last episode. Well, there's an epilogue which I'm going to bust out some other time. I'm not going to tell you when. There is an epilogue. We'll tie up a few loose ends, let you know what happens to people. But as for this 45 minutes of pure story you're about to listen to, this is the final episode of the book. And because it is the final episode, this episode is sponsored by the hardcover horror novel coming out December 30th called Contagious. Now, do not fast forward this to get to the story. All I'm asking for at this point is 6.5 minutes of your time to spiel my spiel, then we'll get rolling. Now, many of you listening to this have already pre-ordered the book from scottsigler.com/preorder, or you are planning to invade your local bookstore on December 30th. Many others of you will not buy the book at all, and that's fine. That's your prerogative. You can listen to the free podcast that will go on for 5 or maybe 6 months and get the whole story that way. However, I just want to remind you all that we are finishing up episode number 40 of Nocturnal, well over 20 hours of unabridged audiobook. You have probably listened to Ancestor, to Earthcore, to Infected, to The Rookie, the Bloodcast, and are probably listening to the stories from The Crypt as well. All told, I have produced somewhere in the range of 110 to 120 hours of free, uninterrupted, unabridged content. To listen to all of it straight through would entail 5 days of you not doing anything but listening to the sound of this lovely voice. With sleep deprivation, possibly food deprivation, and with stories that are so riveting you probably can't even get up to go to the bathroom, you would simply die. That is how much fiction I have given you guys, a lethal dose of fiction. If you want to give a little something back, now is your opportunity. Number 1, pre-order the book. Number 2, go buy at least 1 copy on December 30th. If you really dig what I'm doing and finances allow, buy more than 1 copy. Give them out to friends and family. And whether you buy it or not, please take a few minutes after this episode to go to scottsigler.com/support. I have updated this page. The main thing I put on there that's a lot of fun is the Contagious Holiday Video Greeting Card, provided in conjunction with YouTube. This is a really fast way for you to email the video to 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 of your favorite friends and family, and it gets sent out with a fancy little holiday greeting border around the bloody Contagious video. Super cool way to spread the word. I've got the free PDFs up there that you can send to people, which will take you maybe 5 minutes. The video, email, take you 5 minutes, 10 minutes at the most. The Contagious audio promo is up there. If you've got a podcast, just grab it and play it. The Contagious cover art, which you can email to friends or you can put up on your website. I've got a link there so that you can put the Contagious trailer on your website, your MySpace, or your Facebook page. If you're one of them crazy, wacky kids with a MySpace or a Facebook page, put the trailer up there. Let your friends know it's there. And then the last 2 things, make sure you've got a Yahoo account ready for December 30th and be tuning in to scottsigler.com to see what you're supposed to do with it. And if you're one of the really geeky Web 2.0 people, check out StumbleUpon. If you've already got StumbleUpon, start playing with it. Be ready to go on December 30th. If you don't have it and you got some time to kill, check it out. A lot of people have tried it for me and they hate it and they think it sucks. So if you don't like it, don't worry about it. Some people like it. You don't, no problem. Why am I asking everyone to get behind this effort? Well, I'll tell you. We've been crunching the numbers and looking at the state of the publishing industry. And quite frankly, we have a fantastic shot to get onto the New York Times bestseller list. It would be a huge career achievement. It would ensure that I would continue to be writing full-time for several more years, which would ensure that you guys would continue to get so much free fiction that to listen to it all would take you 10 or even 20 days of sitting in your own filth and not eating and doing nothing. And if there's a better way to die, I'm not quite sure what it is. So at the end of this episode, I will have a couple of promos for you. And once again, I will be announcing another 50 names of new junkie signups, people who signed up over at scottsigler.com. So if you haven't heard your name announced yet, you'll want to stay tuned to the end of that. At this point, my feelings are this. I've given you guys well over 110 hours of free content. You guys, if you want to, can take 20 or 30 minutes. Start spreading around those videos, start spreading around the audio promo, spreading around the PDF to your friends and family who might like the book, and encourage them to be part of this effort to put the book onto the New York Times bestseller list and go out and buy it December 30th, December 31st, right in there, right in that first week. We've got an awesome shot to put one of your favorite audiobook authors up on the New York Times bestseller list, up on the big board of hardcover fiction. And I hope you guys can help me out, and I hope we make it. Now, we don't need no story so far. You guys know the situation. The Jeremiah O'Brien is sinking like a motherfucker. Our boy Brian the Ninja Clouser is beat up all to crap. Pookie's not doing so good. Chief So, doing real bad. Her daughters, not so good. The rest of the people on the ship, they all could be having a better day. Now, since this is the last episode, when it's done, I will be talking a little bit after about how you can tell me what you think. If there were any parts of the book that really bothered you, if there were parts of the ending that really drove you crazy, if you felt there were loose threads that were not tied up, I'm going to give you ways to contact me and let me know what you think. Because this is the first draft of Nocturnal. I know I have so much more work to go back and make a lot of changes to the plot, a lot of changes to characters, more foreshadowing, more tweaking, more unifying all the different elements that come together for the grand finale of a book that is a Scott Sigler novel. And it would be fun to get your feedback. Maybe you guys have caught something that I missed. Maybe there's a character you want to see more of that I'm not thinking of right now, and it would be easy to work them in. At any rate, I'm rambling. I'll let you know after the episode how you can communicate to me what you thought of the book. I have thoroughly enjoyed making this ride for all of you, and I hope you enjoyed the ride that is Nocturnal. And now, without further ado, after a full year's worth of work, after many ups and downs, I give you the finale of Nocturnal. Brian took a deep breath. He looked down the angled deck at Rex fighting his way through the debris. Even laden with two bodies, trying to move across a literal obstacle course, Rex made better time than Brian could have hoped to make. Brian's right foot was still fucked up. Better than before, but it wouldn't hold if he had to walk through the jagged pile of debris. But he didn't have to go down there. The kid couldn't get away. There was no place to go. Brian looked to his right, to the starboard rail that now rose 20 feet above him. If he could get to that rail, he could keep his hands on the edge, his feet actually on the outside hull, and work his way to the back of the ship. If the list angle kept increasing, Brian would be able to walk near upright on the outside of the starboard rail. He braced his left foot on a narrow edge of broken deck, then jumped, clearing 15 feet in a blink. His fingers caught the rail, then slipped off. He started to fall back, but swung his right hand out hard and fast. Pain screamed through his right shoulder, but his fingers wrapped around the top of the rail. Brian pulled himself up and over. Feet on the outside of the ship, he started to slide along the rail towards the rear. Rex dragged his family members through the debris, trying to keep his footing as best he could. It was harder going here on what would have been directly left of the superstructure if the ship had been level. The tall, broken, boxy, smoking building-like construct blocked the light from the bridge above, casting deep shadows down the slanted deck. Rex looked up as he walked. Movement at the corner of the superstructure. A woman, feet constantly adjusting on the sloping deck, one arm wrapped around a taut crane cable, the other holding a bag hidden by the shadows. She leaned out, past the corner, and her face caught the lights of the bridge. Rex hissed in sympathetic pain. Her face looked monstrous, blackened and blistered, burned so bad she barely looked human. Scorched lips peeled back from teeth that blazed discolorish white in the Golden Gate's glare. Her right eye socket held nothing but a deep shadow. The left eye worked fine and had locked onto him. It narrowed. Despite the horrid burns, the woman smiled. She tossed the bag towards him. It circled through the air, then landed at his feet on a lumpy pile of broken concrete. But it wasn't a bag. It was Pierre's head, sawed free at the neck. "No," Sly hissed. "Not Pierre." Rex stepped back a little, his body recoiling away from the decapitated head. Pierre's nose had broken, and much of his fur was burned off. Bare skull shone wet white in some places. His friend, his family member. This man had worshipped Rex, stood by his side, followed his orders to go onto the ship, followed orders that got him killed. Pierre's death was on Rex's hands. He looked back up at the woman. She was still smiling. The hand that had held Pierre's head pointed at Rex. Then she stuck out her thumb and dragged it across her own throat. "You're next," she said, without actually speaking a word. It had to be Chief Zoe. How could she have possibly overpowered Pierre? And if she could get Pierre, she could get him. Another explosion shook the ship. The woman's free hand grabbed for the crane cable as her feet slipped on the steeply slanted deck. The ship shuddered and continued to tilt. It was all the woman could do to keep from falling down to the rail. She was no threat, for now. "My king!" Rex didn't have time to deal with her. He had to reach Firstborn. He had to save his people. Still carrying Devil Dan, Rex took a deep breath, then stepped over Pierre's severed head, urging Sly to go forward. If it wasn't for the cloak, Pookie knew he would have drowned for sure. As it was, he barely managed to stay afloat. If the girls would just calm the fuck down. Murr was fine, treading water, coughing a little bit and clearly scared, but managing. Tabs had already slipped under twice. Pookie kept one arm under her neck, the other arm struggling to help him tread water. Burning oil slicks began to spread across the surface, casting sick, flickering shadows on Murr's face. Pookie felt the current pulling at him, taking him out under the bridge, out to sea, or maybe pulling him right into one of the burning slicks that surrounded him. He couldn't make it to shore if he had to carry Tabs. 2 hours, maybe 3 to daylight, and within 20 minutes, he'd be well out into the North Pacific. He was fucked. The water broke to his right. Had to be a motherfucking shark. He'd read about shark attacks in the San Francisco Bay, even great whites and shit. A black head rose out, and Pookie's heart pounded as his brain tried to piece together the image of this newest monster. But it wasn't a monster. It was a man. A man in a wetsuit. "Are you okay?" "Do I fucking look okay?" Pookie said, and in saying it, allowed a little bit of water into his mouth. He coughed and spit, his grip on Tab slipping. She started to kick and scream, thrashing about in panic. Then she was out of his arms. Pookie recovered and looked. The wetsuited man had her in a lifeguard's pose, arm firmly around her neck, her head above water. "Relax, little one," the man said. "I have you now." Tab struggled for a second, then actually relaxed. "Jesus, mister," Pookie said. "I'm glad to see you, but what the fuck are you doing out here?" The man smiled. "I'm fishing," he said. "Can you still move?" Pookie nodded. The man looked at Murr. "And how about you, little one? Can you swim strong for me?" "Yeah," Murr said. The man smiled again. "Then everyone follow me as best you can, and watch out for the burning spots, yes? Swim where I swim. I will get you there." The man started to swim towards the boat, arms still firmly around Tabs' neck. Long, powerful, one-arm strokes taking him away. He looked as at ease in the water as a headlining stripper hanging from a pole. "Where are you going?" Pookie said. "Back to the ship? That thing's on fire and shit." "There is something aboard I must climb up and get," the man said. "Do not worry, no one will see me. Just keep up, the burning oil is spreading." Pookie stopped just long enough to look back. The man was right. The burning oil now covered where he had been moments earlier. The stuff moved fast. Murr passed him by, her little arms chewing up the distance in a well-practiced American crawl. Pookie turned and started swimming after the man, towards the back of the Jeremiah O'Brien. Rex's feet splashed through water. Not much, maybe an inch or so, collecting at the inside bottom of the port rail. Not much, but enough. The listing had stopped at about 50 degrees. The top edge of the port rail hovered mere inches above the waterline.
Up on his right, now some 30 feet up the deck's newly steep slope, Rex saw Firstborn. The former leader of Marie's children stood on the side of the black cannon. He was looking back to the angled, smoke-billowing superstructure. Both of his hands, one normal, one wrapped in a bloody rag, cupped his mouth.
My king!
And Rex knew in that instant that Firstborn was no longer his enemy, no longer a threat to his rule. Rex moved forward as best he could, his legs wading through water that hid sharp concrete and twisted metal, the massive arm of Sly around his right shoulder, his left around Sly's waist, his right arm holding a limp Devil Dan. "Sly, can you jump?" Sly looked down, saw his feet were quickly vanishing in the black water. He looked at Rex and nodded.
"Yes, my king. Where to?"
Rex pointed up. As strange as it felt, up was the same as across had been just a few minutes ago. Sly looked up and saw Firstborn.
"Are you sure?"
Sly asked. Rex nodded.
"No!"
A weak voice from under Rex's right arm. Devil Dan. He reached up and grabbed Rex's shirt, his hand smearing even more blood on the fabric.
"No, my king," Dan hissed. "He wants to kill you. He is not to be trusted."
"He is not the enemy," Rex said. "He is our greatest warrior, and he will do what I tell him to do." Rex felt the cold water sweep up over his calves. They didn't have long. "Firstborn!" he shouted up. The ancient creature looked down, saw Rex, then immediately started looking around the cannon platform, looking for something to lower down. An explosion from deep inside the ship shook the metal hull and scattered new chunks of concrete deck. A crane snapped free, its cables tearing and whipping across the tilted deck like lethal metal snakes. The crane crashed down below the cannon platform, the cables that remained attached, holding it halfway between the platform and the water. The footing shifted under Rex once again. He felt himself rising up, the water draining away. With the mournful roar of a dying dragon, the front of the Jeremiah O'Brien quickly slipped underwater, forcing the aft section up out of the water. Debris started sliding down the inside of the port rail, slowly at first, but building in speed as the ship's rear rose high into the air. Rex wrapped his legs around Devil Dan, then grabbed one of the loose crane cables just as the debris flow started to pull him back to the water. He held on tight, broken pieces of the ship hitting him, cutting him, as they rained down from above. Firstborn dropped from the gun deck, somehow managing a delicate, graceful landing amongst the sliding debris. He grabbed Devil Dan, scooping him up like a sick child. The sudden movement made Dan cry out in pain. Then his head lolled backwards as he passed out.
"Come,"
Firstborn said.
"Just on the other side of this ship, Tricky Dick is waiting for us. I killed the Russians and the Italians. We have done it, my king."
Firstborn looked up the slanted deck, planted his feet on the inside port rail, then jumped. He sailed up and over the now oddly angled cannon, landing atop the back of the gun deck. What had once been a vertical wall was now a nearly horizontal floor. Rex couldn't help but marvel at Firstborn's grace, his strength, his power. The ship's rear continued to rise into the air as the front sank deeper. Sly jumped next, his hands grabbing onto the gun deck rail before he pulled himself up. Rex checked his footing, then leapt. He was getting the hang of it now. His arc took him on top of the platform to land next to Firstborn. The cannon stuck up almost vertical next to Rex, and he held it to keep his balance on the slanted surface. He could learn so much from this man. Firstborn would be his right hand, not Sly.
"Do you see the yacht?"
Firstborn asked, pointing out into the fog. And Rex did see it, the ghostly white image of rescue, just 50 feet away. He nodded. A shadow dropped down. It must have been on the very back of the boat, by the propeller. The shadow landed behind Firstborn. The Skull Smile Man. A hand shot out to grab the right side of Firstborn's head, smashing his left temple into the angled cannon's barrel. Rex heard two sounds, the crunching of Firstborn's head and the deep, animal growl of the Skull Smile Man. "I came for you, motherfucker!" the Skull Smile Man screamed, then grabbed a fistful of Firstborn's hair, yanked his head back, and smashed him into the cannon barrel a second time. Firstborn sagged to his knees. Sly elbowed past Rex on the narrow surface, then kicked out with his left foot. Skullsmile turned ever so slightly, and the foot shot past. Skullsmile caught it under his right arm. He raised his left arm and brought it down in a vicious windmill, the forearm smashing into Sly's knee. The knee bent the wrong way, bent 45 degrees the wrong way. Sly screamed and fell back, hands still scrambling for a hold as he started to slide off the gun deck's angled rear. The Skullsmile turned to face Rex. Such savagery, and the wide eyes inside those black slits reflected the animal capable of such rage. "Your turn," he said, and Rex braced himself. It would come down to this. Rex would have to fight for his life against this psychotic monster. Skullsmile reached out, but before his hands closed on Rex's neck, Firstborn popped up between them, a hand reaching back to move Rex clear.
"Gang, jump!"
Firstborn screamed. The left side of his face was a sheet of blood and torn skin. Skullsmile's hands locked around Firstborn's throat. Firstborn's hands came over the top to lock on Skullsmile's throat. It was only a 10-foot jump from the back of the cannon platform to the very rear end of the ship, which now stuck up maybe 100 feet from the surface of the water. Rex knew he could do it. He grabbed the scruff of Devil Dan's neck, then grabbed Sly's wrist, then bent to jump, and almost bit it when he slipped in Sly's blood. Rex's left foot shot out from under him, too far, pulling something in his groin. He hobbled on his right foot, bounced on it for a second, then refocused. Pain or no pain, he had to save his people. Pushing off on just his right leg, he jumped. The one-footed attempt and the weight of Sly and Devil Dan threw him off balance, but one foot was enough to launch himself and both men to the very back end of the Jeremiah O'Brien. They landed in a messy heap on the rear rail that had been vertical just 20 minutes ago, but now was a horizontal point like the apex of a roof that sloped away on both sides. Arms and legs fell through the rail, but bodies did not. Sly, Devil Dan, and Rex lay on this point 100 feet above the water, maybe 100 feet below the west side of the Golden Gate Bridge. Rex felt a downward movement, like a slow elevator ride. The O'Brien was sinking, nose first. And just 10 feet below his rail, Firstborn balanced on the back edge of the gun deck, squaring off against the skull-smiled monster. Amy Zoe hung by one burned hand, skinless fingers clinging to a rough metal cable. She couldn't feel pain anymore, couldn't feel anything, except the constant burning of her skin and the freezing, damp cold that made every muscle shiver. She just wanted to go to sleep. Amy scanned the water with her one good eye, searching the burning surface for any sign of two little girls struggling in the liquid flame. She saw nothing. And then, as the ship's rear elevated, opening up the view of the surface, she saw bodies in the water. Some weren't moving, but 4 of them were. One of the moving bodies, a man in a black wetsuit, grabbed a cable and started crawling up the outside of the port rail like a mountain climber. He seemed bent on reaching the back of the O'Brien, which was now high above her. That left 3 moving bodies. 2 of them the same size, and smaller than the third. Pookie Chang and her daughters. She felt back with her feet, looking for purchase. She found it, the soles of both shoes pressing against a flat surface. She planted, let go of the rail, and pushed off, plummeting some 15 feet to the burning water below. For having a pair of hairy hands wrapped tight around his throat, Brian had surprising clarity of thought. It would be Firstborn, then Rex. No fucking matter. Brian Clauser was going to kill them both. First come, first serve. Firstborn was stronger than Sly. Brian sensed that almost instantly. He squeezed Firstborn's thick neck muscles with everything he had, and that still wasn't enough. Firstborn's hairy thumbs dug into his windpipe, cutting off the air. Had that lasted another 5 seconds, it could have been a problem. But it didn't last 5 seconds, because Brian, the Ninja Clouser, wasn't known for fighting fair. Brian kept his hands tight on Firstborn's throat as he pushed off the deck-turned wall. His move caught the bigger man by surprise, and Brian turned as they fell past the black cannon. The monster's back smashed into the gun deck's metal rail. Brian's knees landed on the creature's stomach. He felt ribs snap underneath. Firstborn's chokehold loosened, and Brian swept his forearms up and under, knocking the monster's hands away. Brian leaned all his weight forward and smashed his forehead into Firstborn's mouth. The blow hurt Brian, but in a good way, because he knew it was far worse than being on the receiving end. He reared back for another, loving it, relishing the power, the pain, the hatred. Then he heard the gunshot and felt something punch into his right thigh. He heard a second gunshot, and a third. And then the pain hit home. His leg. No fancy fabric armor coat there, just jeans, little protection against a bullet, against 3 bullets. Brian slumped to the right, his body catching in the gun deck's rail. Through the railing, he could see all the way down to the superstructure, over 100 feet below. The water rose up over the superstructure, drowning it, extinguishing fires and cooling hot metal with steamy, smoky hisses. Brian pushed against the railing, trying to rise, but found he had only enough energy to flip over on his back. It was over. He had nothing left. Firstborn looked like shit. Breathing heavy, broken nose, big gash on his left temple, moving with the wincing pain of cracked ribs. He looked like shit, but he did move, which meant he was better off than Brian. And Firstborn held a silenced Mark 23 in his left hand. The monster straddled Brian, a knee on either side of Brian's chest.
Your kind ends now,
Firstborn said. Brian sensed him more than heard him, sensed the glowing in his chest grow. Firstborn reached down with his bloody right hand, grabbed Brian's mask and yanked. The skull cap and the skull smile mask ripped free. The monster tossed it away. He pointed the gun at Brian's face. A hiss, a thunk. Something sticking out of Firstborn's right shoulder. A bloody bit of metal. An arrowhead. His legs cold, his body weak, Brian looked up and saw an amazing sight. Savior, hanging upside down from a rope some 30 feet above the point of the Jeremiah O'Brien, dangling like a spider at the end of a long strand of silk. One leg entwined in a rope that dangled down from the Golden Gate Bridge. Savior's free foot, pinching the rope tight against his thigh. Both hands free. Right hand, gripping the bow. Left hand, reaching behind him, grabbing an arrow, pulling it out, and notching it. Firstborn shook his head, shaking off the pain perhaps, then turned his shoulders and started firing. Savior drew back the bow and aimed, but even as fucked up as he was, Firstborn was clearly one hell of a shot. Savior twitched, then dropped the bow and curled up. Firstborn kept firing. Savior grabbed the rope with his hands, freed his legs, and then he dropped. Pure poetry. His green cloak flapped behind him as he fell 20 feet towards the very point of the Jeremiah O'Brien's stern. Rex felt the ship sliding into the sea. Finally, it was all going to be over. Firstborn had just taken out Skull Smile, and would have finished him off if not for the nightmare. Who could believe such a thing unless you saw it with your own eyes? Savior, hanging down from the Golden Gate Bridge, hanging upside down, shooting his demon bow and bearing an arrow in Firstborn's shoulder. Who could withstand such an attack? Firstborn, that's who. The eldest Nocturnal had turned and fired. Savior fell. Rex felt a surge of hope that Savior was already dead, killed by bullets, and that his lifeless body would smash into the point of the rear rail. But he wasn't dead. Cloak fluttering down around him, he somehow landed on his feet, right next to Rex and Sly and Devil Dan. Such grace, like he weighed nothing at all. Savior's feet had no sooner touched than he jumped again, seeming to bounce off the very point of the rear rail and drop to the gun deck below. As he hit the apex of that jump, his hand shot inside his flapping cloak and came out with two things: a big, chrome handgun and a 10-inch knife. No wonder this creature was the stuff of nocturnal nightmares. Rex watched, mesmerized, as the monster dropped down to the gun deck below. Savior's feet hit the flat, rear part of the gun deck, the one that had been vertical 20 minutes earlier and now was flat as a floor. And his right foot slid through a thick smear of Sly's blood. The right foot went over the edge. Savior tried to recover, arms shooting out for balance, but before he could correct, the right foot hit the base of the cannon, slid between the base and a footrest, and snapped. Savior threw his head back and screamed. Firstborn moved fast. He holstered his pistol, then reached up from his spot on the rear rail and grabbed the handles of the now vertical cannon. With just his left hand, Firstborn pulled himself up and swung to the cannon's left side, where Savior was trying to free his bent leg. Savior saw Firstborn coming. He brought up the big chrome pistol and started firing, once, twice, 3 times. All the bullets had to hit Firstborn, but he kept coming. The eldest Nocturnal finished his upward swing. He let go of the cannon handle as he did, and turned to face down at the same time. The acrobatic move let him wrap his feet and forelegs around the vertical, black cannon barrel, and when his upper body dropped, it fell chest first on top of Savior. Savior adjusted to the move, reaching up with both the knife and the pistol. The left-handed knife never landed. Firstborn caught Savior's wrist. The right-handed gun didn't make it on target either, because Firstborn's head snapped forward and he bit down hard on Savior's gun hand. Such a sight. Firstborn hanging from the cannon barrel, pinning Savior's knife hand, his teeth crunching down on Savior's gun hand, blood shooting onto his beat-up face, Savior screaming and pulling, but he had nowhere to move. And beyond them, down the ship, Rex saw the water rushing up as the ship continued to dive nose first towards the ocean floor. It was past the superstructure now, leaving only the rear of the ship pointing straight out of the water. Savior's chrome pistol fell away, bounced on a rail, then disappeared into the blackness with a small splash. Firstborn ripped the knife away from Savior. Savior's hand shot up, trying to grab Firstborn's throat. The eldest Nocturnal batted the hands away, then swung the knife down in a vicious arc. The blade sank deep into Savior's stomach, so deep, Rex heard the metallic ring of the knife point hitting the cannon metal at Savior's back. The Savior hood dropped away. An old man. An old man, eyes wide with shock, mouth open in disbelief. "No," he whispered. "Not like this. I need my revenge." As the water continued to slide up the ship, Firstborn spit a bloody glob of phlegm in Savior's face.
Revenge? Yes, there is revenge, monster. My revenge, for my people, for the hundreds of Marie's children that you butchered.
Still hanging upside down, Firstborn put the point of the broken knife on Savior's sternum.
You lose.
The arm muscles beneath his silky short black fur rippled and twitched. Blood dripping down from his shattered nose, Firstborn drove 6 inches of the bloody knife into Savior's sternum. The old man's eyes widened even further, just for a moment. Then they sagged. More with sadness than pain.
You die knowing we won,
Firstborn said.
You die knowing that I killed you and your apprentice, and that your kind ends forever. You die a failure.
Firstborn grunted as he put even more strength into the thrust. Something gave way inside Savior's chest, and the knife drove in until the handle hit flush. It was over. Over. Rex knew that they had won. They had beaten all nocturnal enemies, and the dawn would bring a new day for his people. "Wake up, Dan," Rex heard from behind, Sly, tending to his brother. "Wake up! You were right about Firstborn." Then Rex felt a strong arm slide around his throat, and a sharp, overpowering pain in his back. Rex blinked. Something lifted him. He fell towards the cannon below. Steam hissed out of tears in the metal hull, and smoke billowed from every torn seam remaining above water. That water rushed up over the rear crane, leaving less than 100 feet of the O'Brien above the waterline. Both of his enemies lay prone on the rail below. Both of his enemies lay below him. The new one, this mystery member of the family who fought with such brutality, and the old one, the nightmare, the savior. Both of them, broken and defeated. Firstborn had served his king well. He'd earned his place at his king's side. He grabbed the cannon base with his left hand, then unhooked his legs and feet from the barrel. His head hurt so bad, and fighting while upside down hadn't helped that pain. Being able to only move one hand, it was difficult to get down, but he put his feet on either side of Savior's body, careful not to let his own feet slip into the thin spaces that had cost the nightmare everything. A patter of blood dribbled down from above. He saw it splattering on Savior's dead face before he noticed that it was also spilling on the back of his neck and on his shoulders. Something hit him from above. Firstborn ducked, crouching so his hand rested on the cannon base, instinctively ready to strike at whatever moved. The thing that had hit him landed on top of Savior's corpse. Then Firstborn saw what it was. The king, Rex, with a knife sticking out of his back, right above the heart. No. Any sense of reality, of strategy, it all simply evaporated. Firstborn grabbed his king, helped him so he wouldn't fall farther down. He grabbed the knife handle and pulled it free. He looked at the knife, just for a second, and saw what it was. The same knife used by the Savior.
No,
he whispered, shaking his head, knowing that Rex could not heal from any wound caused by this blade, could not heal fast enough to make a difference. Rex's hand sprang to life, clutching at Firstborn's forearms. Rex's eyes grew wide but unfocused. What's happening? "Don't move, my king," Firstborn said. "I have to get you out of here." The boy's eyes focused for a moment, locked on Firstborn. "Why? I just wanted to protect our people." "Be quiet," Firstborn said. "I have to move you now, get you to the yacht." Rex nodded weakly. "The king!" came the call from up above, from the very rear of the ship. Firstborn looked up to see Sly and Devil Dan up there, looking down through the rear rail. "You killed him!" Dan said, his voice forced and weak, yet carrying the clear tones of shock and hatred. "You killed the king!" Firstborn shook his head. He shook it hard. No, he hadn't killed the king. There must have been a third savior, someone who snuck up. Then Firstborn saw the smile on Sly's face. Saw it, and knew. Rex had told everyone in home that Sly was second in command. Rex had done that because he thought Firstborn was a threat. He'd done it to remove any temptation that Firstborn might have to kill Rex and reclaim his leadership. Even then, Firstborn had marveled at Rex's innate grasp of the culture. But looking up, he now knew the truth. Sly had planted the idea in Rex's head, then waited for the right opportunity. "We gotta go, Dan," Sly said, his eyes never leaving Firstborn's. "We have to tell the others." Just as they slid back, out of sight behind the ship's outer hull, Rex's grip on Firstborn's forearms weakened, slackened. Firstborn looked down. He had spent 2 centuries killing, and he knew death when he saw it. Rex de Pravdachuk, his king, was dead. The water rose up, spreading over Firstborn's legs, lifting up Rex's body, Firstborn looked around and saw that the ship was almost under. The body of the new savior floated on the black water. The old savior, the one wearing the cloak, floated away as well. And beyond them, a yellow raft. Survivors. But none of it mattered. What mattered was killing Sly. As the water covered Firstborn's waist, he bent and touched his forehead to that of his dead king. He held it there for a second, held it as the water rose up over his chest. Then he let go. Firstborn put the Mark 23 barrel in his mouth, bit down with his teeth, then reached out and grabbed the ankle of the dead savior. He pulled him close, yanked the knife out of his heart, then pushed the body away. The gun in his teeth, the knife in his hand, he hopped out of the water and onto the very back of the Jeremiah O'Brien. It was too bad Dimitri was dead. Nick Murray would have loved to ask the gangster just what the fuck was going on. He hid under the O'Brien's propeller, being one with the wet shadows. So many crazy things. First, a big man with a snake face dressed in a bloody, torn-up three-piece suit. His leg was bent 45 degrees the wrong way. That had to smart. And the freakish snake-faced man half-helped, half-carried a bloody midget with a monkey face. As if that wasn't enough, both of them kinda held onto each other and jumped a three-legged jump, the likes of which Nick had never seen, a jump that carried them both 30 yards to the white yacht that had trailed the O'Brien for hours. They fell short, hitting the water, but then the largest human being Nick had ever seen reached down and plucked them out of the water like two dead fish. But wait, as the late-night TV commercial said, there's more. While the others had been big and frightening, the most terrifying thing Nick had ever seen crawled over the rear rail. And with 10 years in the Russian Special Forces and another 10 taking care of various little errands for the Russian mob, Nick knew terrifying. But this thing, well, it just took the frackin' cake. Tall, covered in short, glossy black fur. A face so smashed in its nose looked more like an open sore than an actual nose. A silenced Mark 23 in its teeth, a long knife in its left hand, its right arm dangling uselessly, shoulder trailing blood, what looked like an arrowhead sticking out of it, ripped jeans, thigh holsters, combat boots. And all of that looked intimidating, sure, but it was the expression in the creature's eyes that made Nick pray he wasn't seen. Just one look at this thing, and it moved to the very top of Nick's Things I Do Not Want to Meet in a Dark Moscow Alley list. The creature leaned against the propeller, now only a couple of feet away from the hiding Nick. It put the knife into the left thigh holster that was obviously made for the Mark 23. It buttoned the holster, then pulled on the knife handle to make sure it would stay. It did. It reached up, took the Mark 23 out of its mouth, and held it with its left hand. Then the creature leaned away from the propeller, knelt, and jumped. Nick didn't see the results, because at that very moment, the water slid over the rear of the O'Brien, up around Nick and the propeller. He let go and swam free. Debris and bodies floated up everywhere, but he was only looking for one thing. And he saw it almost instantly. A canvas bag. 2 strong strokes brought him to it. He looked inside, found what he hoped he'd find, then put the strap over his shoulder and started swimming back to the man and the children. They weren't far away, and he could already see that another survivor had joined them. Firstborn landed in a crouch on the yacht's deck. 15 feet away, 5 heads locked onto him. Sly and Devil Dan, both badly wounded, but also Tricky Dick and the 2-headed monster that was Servo and Fort. 5 sets of eyes that looked at him with pure hatred. "Why?" Devil Dan hissed. Why?
It wasn't me,
Firstborn said.
it was Sly.
I saw you, Dan hissed. Then he looked at Firstborn's thigh. You still got the knife that killed him! Firstborn actually looked down. Perhaps to check and see if the knife was there, perhaps to see if he really had been dumb enough to bring it. When he looked up, Fort had already closed half the distance, a silent, massive, shadowy blur. Firstborn should have fired, but his brain dragged in slow motion, partially from grief and partially because Servo and Fort couldn't be a threat. He'd bounced them both on his knees so many years ago, cheered them on during the many grooms walks. They were just kids. Strong kids. A massive hand grabbed his throat and lifted and slammed all in the same motion. Teak and fiberglass shattered under his back. The big right hand squeezed and held him still as the left knotted into a fist the size of an anvil and slammed down. The blow drove Firstborn further into the ship, knocking him through the deck and into a bedroom below amongst a shower of wood and fiberglass splinters. Fort wasn't a kid anymore. Firstborn looked to his right. There was Sean Robertson, the human, the sub-chief. Robertson ran out of the bedroom into the main area of the boat, and the noise from above drew Firstborn's attention. Big hands reached into the hole, thick fingers spreading inside like the limbs of a chest-sized spider before lifting, tearing the ceiling away. He even remembered Servo and Fort's favorite bedtime story, Charlotte's Web. He remembered how Little Vo giggled every time someone read the words, "some pig." Firstborn had to get the hell out of there, or he'd have to kill these kids. Kill them, or die himself. Massive arms reached down through the wide, jagged hole, reaching out with rage and anguish. Firstborn raised his Mark 23 and pulled the trigger, punching a neat hole through Fort's right hand. The hand drew back even as the left continued to reach in, throwing the big creature off balance. Firstborn emptied the entire Mark 23 magazine, tracing an 11-shot dotted line up Fort's left arm. Fort shook from the shots, then fell through the hole into the bedroom. Firstborn rolled to the right as the big body crashed face first into the bed, his little face and Servo's big face. Firstborn stepped on Fort's broad back and then jumped out of the hole, back up onto the deck. He had just a second to see Tricky Dick standing close to the hole, Tommy gun leveled, before the Tommy gun started barking out shots. Firstborn felt bullets punching into his chest, his stomach, his arms, his legs. He stumbled back a half step before realizing in a flash that if he fell into that hole, Fort would snap him in half. So he dove to the left, to the yacht's rail. The Tommy gun clicked on empty. Firstborn looked up. Tricky Dick was reloading. He was fast, but not fast enough. Firstborn had to fight through the pain. He couldn't handle another barrage like that. He gathered to leap. And just as he did, the deck erupted, the hole to the bedroom now a trench as Fort stood tall, feet on the bed, waist just past the shattered teak planking. Tiny Servo remained wrapped around his brother's neck, beady eyes glaring with rage and hate. "Get him," Servo said. The tiny mouth, on Fort's tiny grapefruit-sized head, just snarled. His big hands reached up and smashed down on the deck, clearing a line to Firstborn's spot at the rail. Through all that noise, Firstborn heard a click and the tiny ring of a spring locking home. Tricky Dick had reloaded. It was over. Firstborn knew he had no chance at all. He used the last of his strength to push himself over the rail. He fell 10 feet, splashed into the black water, then sank beneath the surface. Brian bled. He was getting pretty good at that, it seemed. "Hey, Bri-Bri, you got any aspirin in that fancy suit of yours? I feel like a dried-up dog turd." He looked at Pookie, who sat on the back end of the big yellow rubber life raft, paddling away with an unfolded plastic paddle. "Are you for real, Pooks? Fucking look at me, man." Pooks glanced down for a second, then returned his gaze to the horizon and kept paddling. Granted, you do look like a mangled crocodile cock after two pygmies played tug-of-war with it, man, Pookie said. But let's be honest with ourselves. First, you were never what anyone would call an attractive man. Second, aren't you some kind of freak? You'll heal and shit, right? My delicate skin does not have such unholy advantages.
Brian shook his head. Well, Pookie was right. Brian would heal. Probably. He kept a hand jammed against his left shoulder. All the other wounds had stopped bleeding, but not this one. Still felt like a skillet full of bubbling bacon grease was in there. Hopefully, the Jessups had experience with this kind of thing. Maybe Brian would need a blood transfusion, like they had done for Jebediah. Pookie worked the oar, as did the man in the wetsuit who sat on the back of the raft next to Pookie. Brian sat inside the front. He couldn't look behind him, but he knew they were headed to the shore. The current was still taking them. If they were lucky, they would make it to Fort Point, which was tucked under the south end of the Golden Gate. If not, they'd wind up somewhere on Ocean Beach on the city's west side. He looked to his left. Chief Amy Zoe, shivering. Her face and hands a bloody mess of blisters and blackened flesh. Her arms wrapped tightly around Murr and Tabs. Someone had wrapped wet strips of cloth around Amy's eyes. Tabitha stared out into nothing, her body shaking with sobs. Girl was going to need some counseling, to say the least. Murr wasn't shivering at all. Her hands petted her mother's leg, one of the few places that Amy wasn't burned. Murr was staring as well, staring right at Brian. The little girl's eyes shone with admiration and an angry, sneering intensity. Hero worship. Like Pookie, Amy had no strange ability to heal. Her recovery would be long, excruciating, and she would never be the same again. Pookie looked over to the man in the wetsuit.
You kind of seem to be taking all of this in stride, he said.
The man shrugged.
I have seen worse. That's a funny accent you've got, Pookie said. Where exactly are you from? Have you ever been to Topeka?
The man said. Pookie shook his head.
Then I am from Topeka,
the man said, then smiled. He kept rowing, strong arms driving the boat forward with a mechanical, practiced motion. Brian looked to his right, at the body of Jebediah Jessup, the Savior, stabbed through the heart with his own knife. The man had died fighting for what he believed in, fighting to protect people from the king. Together they had succeeded. Not a heroic, happy Hollywood ending, to be sure, but the results of that battle lay in the other end of the rubber raft, between Pookie and the wetsuited man. The body of Rex Depravdichuk, the person who had ordered the death of Robin Hudson. And now he was as dead as a motherfucking doornail. There would be no king to lead Marie's children, to lead the Nocturnals. The king was dead. Mission accomplished. Brian stared at the boy's body, feeling a wild mix of emotion. Satisfaction at getting some level of payback for Robin's death. Accomplishment for stopping Rex from taking over the city's crime organizations. Confusion at who had finally killed the kid. Justice for the murders of the Boyko gang and Rex's teachers, his parents. And a deep sadness at losing the person who had made Brian feel like he truly belonged to something. Perhaps, out of all those things, he felt the sadness most of all. Because Rex had been family. But so was Firstborn. So was Sly. Had they escaped? If so, Brian would track them down. Track them down if it took the rest of his life. He was going to exterminate them all. That was his calling, his reason for being. To kill the monsters, just as Jebediah had done before him. Because Brian, the ninja Clouser, the cop, that man was no more. Now, he was one thing and one thing only. He was the Savior. And you guys thought that Pookie was gonna die.
He's motherfucking Pookie Chang. He's the inventor of the Chang Bang. I will not guarantee that he will always live because, as you may have guessed from listening to this book, there's going to be a sequel. There's probably going to be 2 sequels. Now, real short, I'm talking to Crown about publishing Nocturnal as my 3rd hardcover book out from Crown. I'm talking to them about possibly doing a couple of other books as well, brand new stuff that you guys haven't even heard yet. If we do Nocturnal, one of 2 things has to happen. It's a 220,000 word book. If that was to come out as a standard hardcover, it would be 796 pages. That's a big motherfucking book. Costs a lot of money to make those books. And Crown has basically said, my editor, the Shiv, he says, no, we can't put that out. So my choices are I need to either cut literally 80,000 words out of the book, which of course when I edit this, it's probably going to get a good 30 to 40,000 words are going to be cut out of it. No problem. That's what I wound up cutting out of Infected and Contagious. But that's an awful lot. So option number 2, if option 1 is cutting all that content, option 2 is changing the plot, finding a good place to split the book you just listened to into 2 books. Book 1, then book 2, finishing up the O'Brien, and then book 3. And I'm not even going to fucking tell you what happens in book 3. But it's a whole lot of fun. Now I realize that I am the action-adventure, horror, suspense, literature equivalent of the high school Dick Tease cheerleader chick who makes you think you're going to get some, meaning a sequel, and then she just never puts out. She never ever puts out. Well, I know that I have been dick teasing you with a lot of sequels. Descendant, Mount Fitzroy, The Starter, now the sequel to Nocturnal, and of course, the 3rd book in Infected, Contagious, and then Pandemic. So basically, I'm dangling 5 sequels in front of you. But if I go ahead and pursue that option of splitting what you just heard into 2 books, there would be a 3rd book. It would finish up with a trilogy, and the ending would be huge. Which brings me to the point I mentioned at the very beginning of episode number 40. My email is scott@scottsigler.net. Feel free to email me. Tell me what you thought of the book. If there's things that you think could have been better, tell me. If you thought it was perfect, tell me. If you just didn't like it, tell me. Whatever you want to tell me, it's totally cool. I like getting the feedback. However, I have also created a forum over at scottsigler.com that is called Nocturnal, The End. That's a place I would rather have you go to put in your comments, ideas, suggestions, etc. Because other junkies are going to be in that forum space too. Now, you may have a specific idea, like maybe you thought Sean Robertson should be a crossdresser. Well, other junkies may not agree. They may not think Sean Robertson should be a crossdresser. So you could either email me that idea and I get it in a vacuum, or post it in the forum and see what thousands of other fans of the book think about your idea. Please keep in mind that while I encourage this feedback, I really only use 2, 3, 4% at most of the feedback, because when I get these conversations going, sometimes ideas pop up and I'm like, that's a great idea. Or more commonly, shit, I totally missed that. I'm fully aware there's several plot threads that were not properly resolved. It'll be interesting to see if you guys caught those, or if that's just something that I feel that I have to go back and get myself. Regardless, scottsigler.com, in the forums, Nocturnal, The End, that's the best place to go and talk about it. But if you don't feel comfortable with that, throw me an email. A quick update on the 12 high-res Contagious posters. Some of you went to scottsigler.com/posters and weren't able to find the links to all the posters. At that site, I have now changed it. Go to scottsigler.com/posters. The link for each of the 12 blogs that is listed there, that link now points directly to the poster that is only available from their site. So if you wanted to see what all of the posters look like in glorious high-resolution color, that's where you want to go do it. If you happen to work at a Kinko's or an Office Max, and you happen to have access to a high-resolution large format printer, and your boss happens to go on vacation, and you want to print off several of these high-resolution gigantic posters and then give them out to your friends to go out and put them up where you put up billboard posters for concerts, for books, for movies all over town, who am I to complain? If that's something that you have the power to do, go ahead and do it. If you want to print off those posters in 8.5 by 11 format, put them up around your area, put them on lampposts and flagpoles like they do punk rock style, you can go do that as well. That's a fantastic way to spread the word, get the meme out there about Contagious, and spread it out into your communities. Put them up on billboards at work, whatever you think you might have time to do to promote the book. By all means, it's great. Let's get to our new junkies, my favorite part of every podcast, saying hi to the new junkies. As usual, We start with our non-American junkies in lands other than the United States. People like Mark Wilson from Germany, Lorne from Poland, Danny Weiser from Canada, I Need Money from the Netherlands, Hearn from Canada, who's already participating heavily on the site, Izzy from Mexico, Kit Stay from the UK, Kilchern from Scotland, Scrubba from Australia, Joasos from Norway, Al Joho from the UK, and Parabu from Austria. That is 10 countries represented in one batch of 50 junkies. More proof that Siglerism is becoming a worldwide problem that governments are going to have to deal with. Oh, it's a worldwide phenomenon. Don't think it's not. And then let us move on to the endlessly supportive junkies from America. Junkies like Unquantifiable A, Really Big Things, Wanderlust, Go Hokies, Tesusino, Janistoy 99, Woodan, Aljaho, Go Chamberlain, Coop 925, Fungible, Sayonara, J9, Zombie Killer 666, Magnus, Dr. Palancito, Harmful Guy, Number One Naruto Fan, Shape of Rage, CB, Absaroka, Lizella, and my favorite sign-up of the week, the voice of all of the promos of Scott Sigler books, Ranger Bob. And then there's Pissian, Uncle Adam, Void Munashi, Jay Badger, Jagged Dragon, Margaret, Dayjock, Disgruntled Cow, Palacio Anna Marie, Elbow 01, Scott N57, Mean Amoeba, Zidane the Vampire, Quentin Barnes. Can you believe motherfucking Quentin Barnes signing up on this site? Noel VH, Boss McDread, and K Backelder. All of you, welcome to Siglerism. Welcome to ScottSigler.com. Most of you guys uploaded pictures right off the bat. It's getting to be awesome. I can see what everybody looks like, or see their avatar, or in many cases, see a picture of their dog. And I'm a big dog fan, so that's cool. Junkies, I really hope you enjoyed Nocturnal episode number 40. That's it for the story, except for the surprise epilogue that'll drop someday soon. Don't forget to go to ScottSigler.com/support. Take what time you can to help make this thing bust wide open, bust a nut all over the New York Times bestseller list. Just mess that up with junkie goo left and right. Good day, sir, and I will talk to you very, very soon.
Okay, take one, go ahead.
Snark-infested waters, where faith, art, and fandom collide. So, this Taylor Kent, he ever shot a moose illegally?
Nope, he never had any business dealings with a Chicago slumlord either.
Does he have any interns?
Not a one.
Solid.
One more take, please, Darth.
Snark-infested waters, where faith, art, and fandom collide. We done here?
Uh-huh.
I've got to call Lucas about episode 7, 8, and 9 again.
Snark-infested waters at thesnarkyavenger.com.
All right, if you are still listening, you are a diehard fan of all the good Sigler stuff. That completes Nocturnal Throwback. Episode number 40 completes the entire Nocturnal Throwback podcast. We're all set. We're all done. Good to go. Before the episode, I told you that after the episode, I would explain to you why we're doing the audio-only route for Mount Fitzroy. Now, the fact that you are listening to this as audio probably means you're fine with it. But if you are a diehard who only wants to read books in print or in ebook, we owe you an explanation. And here it is. Now, all of this is posted over at ScottSigler.com. We have a blog post up about why audio only, announcing the Mount Fitzroy audiobook pre-order. And you can go there and read that if you like, or I'll kind of walk you through it. So we know we've been in the business for 15 years now, over 15 years of doing audiobooks, podcast novels, print, hardcover, ebook. We've done everything in the business, and a lot has changed in that time. Remember when we started out, we were so ahead of the game. Podcasts weren't even a thing on iTunes. iTunes didn't even have them yet. The Kindle hadn't come out. The Kindle came out 2 years after we started podcasting. So ebooks were simply not a thing. And Audible was only just beginning to ascend to industry dominance. If you guys hear a little fan action here, it's because it's hot as balls up here in the studio, the underground lair that is shaped like my head. So we have gone from unsigned, giving all of our stuff away unabridged for free to build an audience, all the way up to a deal with Crown Publishing, a deal with Del Rey Publishing, We have hit #1 New York Times bestseller status. We've been #1 at Amazon on both horror and sci-fi. We've been #1 at Audible on horror and sci-fi. We've done really, really well there. Throughout all of that, audiobooks has become far and away our primary source of revenue. Audible launched a thing called Audible Creator Exchange, or ACX, several years, maybe 10 years ago, I'm not sure. But basically it was a way where you didn't have to have a publisher. You could just record your own audiobook, upload it to ACX, and then you could have your book distributed on the Audible platform. This was before Audible was bought by Amazon. Amazon was doing the same thing with the Kindle Exchange and letting people put up their own indie ebooks. We got involved in that really early. The second we heard about it, we were all in for ACX. We were all in to put our own books up on Audible. I mean, we recorded books all the time for the podcast. We were doing our own audiobooks. We're like, we can do this and we can get in early because we knew that ACX and ACX was going to be a big deal and Audible was going to continue to be a big deal. We kind of saw the writing on the wall, as busy as people are, etc. The growth of audiobooks. Like, if we can get in now, we'll do really well. The other thing we saw was Audible, like Amazon, and eventually Amazon bought Audible, was heavy into data and metrics. So Audible can tell you, they know what books you've bought. They know how much of it you listened to. They know whether you liked it or not, if you give a review. They know if you then go on to buy other books by that same author. Then they also know you read Scott Sigler's Earth Core. Other people read Scott Sigler's Earth Core. What other books did those other people read? And then they recommend those other books to you. And the same works in exchange too. Say you read Stephen King's Needful Things, and then you read Earth Core, or you listen to Earth Core. There's a chance that other people who have listened to Stephen King's Needful Things are going to see Earth Core recommended to them. We saw all that data at work, and we're like, and keep in mind, we'd been doing our own books long enough that I literally could not tell how many copies in print my book sold. It would take, at best, 6 months, sometimes 18 months after one of you guys bought a book for me to have any idea if that book sold. I couldn't see where it sold. I couldn't see how much it sold for. I just got this big royalty report. There was no way to check any of it. There was no way to measure. There's no way to measure any impact of marketing. So if I go out and do this advertising campaign, I have to wait 1.5 years to find out if it worked. It was bonkers. So we're looking at that by going through Crown and Random House and Del Rey. On the other side, there was ACX, and we could see stuff the next day. If I did a great marketing campaign, we moved a lot of books, I could see it the next day. So that was the other reason we were so into it, because we were putting out books at a pretty good clip, and we didn't have that 18 to 36 month delay that big publishers had. Like if I got signed to do, say, Scott Sigler's Guide to Being Awesome While Still Being Bald by Del Rey, that book, from the time I signed the contract, it might be 3 to even 4 years before it came out. That wasn't working for us. So that's why we really haven't been pursuing big publishing all that much. We've been focusing all of our efforts on our own content. So Audible controls the data. Audible controls the marketplace. Audible has the ability to flip a data switch and put my book in front of many people. We've been lucky enough to have several daily deals on Audible over the last 10 years. Every time we get one of those, we sell a crap ton of books, we make a crap ton of money, and it keeps the company going for months at a time. So Audible was already where our bread was buttered. We make most of our revenue from audiobooks. We make some money from ebooks. We make some money from print books. Print books are basically, frankly, they're kind of a loss for us. But when we get done with all the work and paying everybody to put them together, and then the packing and the shipping and returns and all of that stuff, there's no way we can make a living on print books alone. But with audiobooks, which are ones and zeros, we absolutely can. We could do the same thing with ebooks because they're ones and zeros. It just turns out we're not very good at selling ebooks. I don't know why that is, but it's something we've not really been all that great at. So Audible's already where our bread is buttered. They have been very happy with our production. They are looking at the numbers for Earth Core, which is our biggest seller over at Audible, and they look at the numbers for the GFL books. They're looking at the ratings. They're looking at how people, when people buy one of my books and like it, they tend to tear through the whole catalog. So we had a lot of features that Audible was looking for in people that they could sign. So we were offered a deal, and we took it, where we would make Mount Fitzroy an Audible original, which means it is going to be on Audible for 12 months before we can put out in print any book. Here's the business case that, even though you guys are annoyed, I think you'll find very compelling. If I was to sell, if if I sell Mount Fitzroy, let's say to Penguin Random House, okay? If I'd signed that book deal a year ago, you would still be waiting another 18 months to see the print book or the ebook or the audiobook. So even though you are waiting a year from the time the audiobook is released, you will still see the ebook and print book faster than if we had gone with Penguin friggin' Random House. So think about it like that. Don't be upset it's going to take a year. You should instead be happy for your print book or ebook that it's going to come up to a year sooner than you would have got it if we had not made this deal. So the reason Audible is asking for this deal is because, again, they are the 800-pound gorilla in the room. They are going to do all their own marketing. They have paid to have the audiobook produced with Ray Porter, who is the audiobook narrator. He did Earthcore. So Audible is making a big investment in this book, and they want to have a window of opportunity to make as much money as they can off the book before it has any competition in other formats. And this is another reason this deal is so great for us. We get to keep the print and ebook rights. So we get to go sell those rights to another publisher. We get to put the things out ourselves if we want to. If I made that same deal with Penguin Random House, they take all the rights. They don't let anybody carve anything out. They take audiobook, ebook, and print, hardcover and paperback. They take everything. All the big 5 publishers take everything. So we actually come out of this with more, owning more of our own IP. We own more of the format you can have that IP. We are doing a wonderful partnership with a company that we really, really like to work with. We think Audible is top notch. They've been great for us. Sometimes it can be hard for them to get back to you fast because they're so big, but they make a lot of efforts. And then the editing process for Mount Fitzroy was great. We've had no problems dealing with that company at all. Final thing I'll say is this. We got Earthcore in on the old royalty format for ACX. And the original royalty format was 50% royalty to the authors. That was unfriggin' heard of at the time. That you could get 50% royalty for an audiobook was insane. The most I think I made for an audiobook was like 8. And for print books, start out at 8, sell 5,000 copies, you go to 10, sell 10,000 copies, you go to 11, sell 15,000 copies, you go up to 12%, which was the max I could get was a 12% royalty on a hardcover or paperback book. The audiobooks, 50% royalty. What's better is the more books you sell at Audible, you start to tick up percentage points on the royalty. So we're making above 50% royalty now. They have since changed that deal. First, they got rid of the increased royalty rate for the books sold. They got rid of that, and it was just a flat 50%. Now it's a flat 40%. But we still have that grandfathered royalty rate for Earthcore, which means if the biggest audiobook seller in the world really puts in a lot of effort to sell the book they locked up the rights for a year, Mount Fitzroy, and they know it's book number 2 in a series, they are also going to be putting all that marketing muscle behind Earthcore, where A Real Girl and I and Empty Set Entertainment still makes a great big royalty off of Earthcore. If this goes according to our plan, what we're hoping will happen is the marketing data power of Audible will put Earthcore in front of thousands of people who don't know who I am, who've never read my books, or have heard of me, and this will be the motivation for them to dive in. And they will start with Earthcore, and if they like it, they will move on to Mount Fitzroy. And then we make money from Earthcore. We make some money from Mount Fitzroy. Frankly, it's not the greatest deal in the world, but you got to remember, we have such a big catalog. We got like 14 books over at Audible. So if Audible is going to use their data marketing power to put my name in front of thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, potentially even millions of active audiobook listeners, this could really wind up being a game changer for Empty Set Entertainment. So that means you got to wait a year. You got to wait a year to get the print or the ebook. We will have the print out on December 3rd, 2021. We'll have the ebook out December 3rd, 2021. But in the meantime, you get an incredible audiobook, 217,000 words. It's 29 and a half hours of entertainment. You get that with one Audible credit. It is read by Ray Porter, who just killed Earthcore, is amazing. Also is the actor who is Darkseid in the Justice League movie. So we have an absolute A-list audiobook guy reading this. He was the 2015 Audible Narrator of the Year. Hopefully we come out of this smelling like a rose. If this is upsetting to you, we're sorry about that. We knew this was a business decision. We looked at all the pros and cons, and we said this is going to make some of our fans unhappy. We know that. We're sorry about that, but we have to make the best decision for our company, and the best decision for our company is letting this juggernaut of data marketing take our book out to a whole new audience that I simply could not reach on my own. That is why we are doing the 12 months only in audiobook form. I hope you've enjoyed this long-winded explanation. We're very happy that you listened all the way through. We're really looking forward to bringing you GFL Book VI, another one I know you guys have been waiting for a while. That's going to come out by the end of November. We're going to start podcasting that. We'll still be podcasting that when it comes out in audiobook, ebook, and print. We do not have publication dates for those things yet, but the audiobook is done. Steve the Iceberg Rickyberg is editing my finished raw audio now. In the next few weeks to a month, we should have some more information on you guys when that's going to come out. But that's 200,000 words. And then you've got Mount Fitzroy, which is 217,000 words. And then you've got the Stone Wolves, which is 180,000 words. It's like, you're within the next 6 months, you're going to get well over 500,000 words worth of Sigler fiction. Probably more like almost 700,000 words of Sigler fiction. If I'm doing the math right, I might not be doing it. That's why I write. I don't do math. So there's a lot of stuff coming your way. We're very happy you listen. As always, we are freaking delighted that you choose to spend so much time with us week in and week out. We love you, even if we don't see your face all the time. If you miss us, tune in to our live stream, Tuesdays and Thursdays, 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern. It is Sigler in Place. We are at youtube.com/ScottSigler, facebook.com/ScottSigler, twitch.tv/ScottSigler. That does it for the Nocturnal Throwback Podcast. We hope you all have enjoyed all of this business. As you can tell, I've had a lot of coffee and I'm pretty excited. And now I'm going to go try and calm down.
You have been listening to Nocturnal, written and performed by Scott Sigler. For more information, go to scottsigler.com. All music in this podcast provided by Uncrowned off their album Devils and Angels, available now at the iTunes Music Store.
Is it all that you needed from this isle? It meant anything at all. To remember you, 'cause I know it means everything. What you want to